I've always enjoyed reading, especially as a kid. I used to spend hours a day just reading whatever I could find, going to the library, buying books. But over the years, that's changed a bit. I recently got this Kindle, and that's been helping me fall back in love with reading. I honestly prefer it over physical books because it's got that nice backlit screen. The battery lasts me more than a month of straight reading, and in general, it's just easier to take around with me. I've been trying to read more while eating instead of watching TV in an effort to reduce my screen time. I don't know if that counts. But one of the drawbacks of the Kindle is it doesn't have an integrated stand. So I'm forced to either 3D print a stand like this one or buy a case with one built in. Additionally, it is very thin and light and portable, but that makes one-handed use a little bit hard, and I find it cumbersome. And finally, I don't love that the power button is on the bottom. I always accidentally hit it when I don't want to. So as a fix, I want to combine a handle, a stand, and retain access to charging. I tried to start with some existing models and remix them, but I just ended up designing from scratch. If you're just looking for a simple protective case, that's where I started, and this will be uploaded too. I started with iterations to fit the profile of the Kindle based on my pictures. I spent a good bit of time on the button and charging port and indicator. As you can imagine, those features are a little bit hard to just get right, but I used this hollowed out type model to keep material costs low. This is version 1 of the Kindle case. You might notice that there are no extra hardware pieces in assembling this case, and that was an additional challenge I gave myself to make the entire thing 3D printed. It features a flexible TPU handle that you slide your hand under. All of the parts either slide on or lock together using geometry. And I went for this sort of fun chocolate and cream colors, but I honestly regret that. I don't think it looks good anymore. I did add this kickstand that slides out and locks into a notch on the back, and that was my first viable use of a stand, and I was pretty happy with it. I didn't get it exactly right this first time, but it gave me a little hope. So problems with this design. First and foremost, the TPU handle, while it did work very well and was really secure, it didn't fit a sort of aesthetic I had in mind, and it also wasn't the most comfortable. And then the stand, while it does work really well, it's off center, so that means it's really easy to tip over. At this point, I spent way longer than I should have creating new designs for different variations of handles and weird ways of interlocking that I thought would make the handle and stand both better. But honestly, even V1 would have been fine for daily use. It's just not quite enough for me. This one's my favorite variation during that process. It uses this top hat design, I'll call it, with teeth, and then you pull the top off. And in doing so, I was trying to make use of the fact that you need to slide the Kindle in. So the top interlocks with the back to become a handle. I thought this was the coolest thing I've ever made. And then my girlfriend used it once and it barely worked. And let's just say I went back to the drawing board a little defeated. But let me know if y'all think this has some promise. Maybe I'll revisit it in the future on a different design. So I continued through trial and a whole lot of error to come up with different ways of holding the Kindle, having it look symmetrical and still function properly while being entirely 3D printed or 3D print filament. The major design change here is using handles that fold away into the back of the case. But there was a lot of issues with it getting stuck, and I just thought it'd be really cool if the handles could spring out on their own and look more professional. So I went through a whole lot of mechanisms, and when I say a whole lot, I do mean a whole lot, like an entire week's worth of printing random things and iterating on them. I so badly wanted this compliant mechanism to work. It was really cool looking, and when it popped up, it just felt magical. But ultimately, I couldn't get it to be very reliable, and it would break after a few iterations worth. I really hope that I can use this in a design later on, but for the purpose of longevity and not having to reprint very often, it just didn't make sense to use. So this design embodies keep it simple, stupid. It is just a switch and then pre-tensioned filament that lets the handles and stand pop up. And since this is the final iteration, I'll show the full assembly process. The only piece that needs support material is the piece at the bottom, the chin, and that just has built-in supports that you can pop out by hand with just a little bit of force. It lines up pretty perfectly with the charging port, and you can just clean up all of the included supports. So you'll need a Kindle and all of these pieces, which you'll note are all 3D printed or 3D print filament cut to different lengths. The handles use pins in the form of 3D print filament, press fit through, and then the channels that the handles fit into are slightly undersized, so that tensions the top and bottom filament pieces to keep them springy. I will note that over time they will lose their tension just from what's called stress relaxation, but for the most part they'll work for a good amount of time. I would suggest using PETG just so that it retains some of that a little bit better than PLA. And you'll have to repeat this for the next handle. The stand is much the same way in that it uses a single pin through the center to rotate, and then pins on either end to retain tension. You'll need to insert the stand and handles on either side away from the body, so they should stick out, and then the locking plate slides in with its dovetail connectors and it'll get locked in place. At that point, you can fold the handles and stands flat, and you can make sure that they move around correctly and see their springiness. From there, you can slide your Kindle in. I would suggest sliding it in partially first so that you can use the exposed end of it to keep the button in place as you push everything together. The button is very tiny and you will lose it. I'm just checking functionality after. You can see the stand locks in place. You can use it sideways, front on. The button works perfectly and is flush with the bottom and even slightly indented, I should say. But overall, I love the look of it. It feels a lot easier to use and hold. I think the matte black, in this case Galaxy Black, is the best looking filament on the market right now, and I paired it with some turquoise and orange PETG for those accent colors, just because I like those colors. Here's what it looks like from the back. Everything is flush with the back, so there's no rocking back and forth if you had it back down, and there's a lip to protect the screen if you have it face down. The beauty of CAD is I was able to set a viewing angle at about 30 degrees from vertical, and the charging port and indicator light remain fully accessible with pretty much any cable. And one of the things I like the most about this design is the button. I printed it at an angle, so it makes use of naturally forming layer lines to give you this nice ridge-like texture. And finally, I can't really accidentally turn it on and off like I was before. I'll be posting these designs to my printables and I'll link them in the description below. Thank you for watching.